everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Stitching Stories. This month we're working on a jeans bin, and I want to show you mine because I realized in film for this episode, a lot of times the camera angles just did not work as well as I thought I had. So the jean bin that I made is here. It's a little bigger than the one that we make in the video, but I decided to add a ribbon as a handle, and instead of organizing a room, I can now use this as a purse or a small carry bag. But I wanted to make sure you all saw that because in the video later on, it's not very easy to see it. As you guys work on your stitching skills, I'm going to work on my video skills, and hopefully we will both get better. And we're going to start with a short lesson on how to thread a needle. And then we're going to work on cutting our jeans and sewing them together with a running stitch and doing some embellishment, which will include an intro to the buttonhole stitch, which we will again use next month. So let's get started. There are many different sizes of needles and sewing needles. So what we're going to use is a Sharps 510. It's a larger size sewing needle, but still pretty tiny. So what I'm going to use is a yarn needle. It has a much larger eye, as you can see, and it'll be easier for you to see how I'm threading the needle. So we have the point, the shaft, and the eye. The eye is the small hole at the top. We're going to be using all-purpose sewing thread, which is still pretty fine. So I'm going to demonstrate with embroidery floss in this bright red so you can see what I'm doing. Now, if you just take the thread or the embroidery floss and shove it at the needle, it's going to crimple and it won't work. So what we're going to do is wrap the thread around the shaft of the needle, pinch it off close. See, so you have a little loop around it, and then you're going to pull the needle out, and it leaves a tiny loop between your fingers. That loop you're going to shove through the eye of the needle and then pull until you have a threaded needle. It's as easy as that. It will take some practice, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to show you one more time. I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle, and then you have the little loop, and you just slide it through the eye. There you go, and keep pulling that loop until you have a threaded needle. And there you go. So now I'm going to show you with our regular one. You can see the eye is much smaller, so this is a little bit harder, but you can still do this. You're going to wrap your thread around the needle. There you go. You have a tiny little loop. Pull it off. And now it's very hard to see because it's fine thread, but it's the same action, pushing it through the eye of the needle. And then just use your fingernails if you can. I hope you can see it with my finger there. And keep pulling it through. Be a little patient. And there you have a threaded needle. Now, if you have a needle threader, they usually have a metal hook or a wire loop. You push that wire loop or the metal hook through the eye of the needle, hook onto the thread, and pull it through. Now that we have a threaded needle, we need to make a knot in the end of the thread so that the thread doesn't go right out of our fabric. So what I do is take the two ends, and we're going to sew with two thicknesses for some extra strength. Take both of them, wrap them around my finger, doesn't have to be tightly, and then I pull that loop off and tuck the tail in between and tug on it to make a knot. I'll usually do this twice if I'm sewing a seam, especially in a heavier fabric. So loop it around the finger, tug it off. Oh, one of the threads got stuck, and then tuck the tail through. It doesn't have to be beautiful. No one is going to see this knot. Okay, so we have our jeans and I have my sewing scissors. First thing we're going to do is lay them out. We're working on the lower leg. You want the hem up to about the knee. You can decide how big you want your bin. We flip over the top, so we want to make sure we have a couple inches, maybe 3 finger widths at the top. That is going to be the cuff for turning it down. So put your fingers up there to remind you, and then look and think about how big you want your bin to be. Make make a big bin? Do you want to make a smaller bin? Think about that. I made a huge one the first time, so I cut it way up here. But you don't have to make it that big. In fact, mine was pretty floppy as an organizing bin. A little tick mark to remind myself how big I'm going to make a short one this time. So I'm going to cut it. This isn't where we're going to cut the fabric, because if we cut it there, I'm just going to get a marker, then the bin would actually be shorter, because we need what's called a seam allowance. Let me show you in the one I've already made. Not sure how well you guys can see the picture, but there's a little bit of fabric underneath where I stitched. That's called a seam allowance, and that keeps the fabric together, and we need that. So to make sure that your bin's not super short, we're going to go an inch or so below that, and you can even go 2 or 3 inches below. You can always cut fabric away. Adding it back in is really hard. So we're just going to make a line. You don't have to be super neat, but you do want to be straight. Take your scissors and you're going to cut in long snips. Long, even snips are better. Be careful of your fingers because these are sharp scissors. We have our denim cut. We're going to have to turn it inside out. That means turning the wrong side out. We're not going to sew it on the side that you see. We're going to sew on the side that you do not see. That's called the wrong side of the fabric. And we talked a little bit about seam allowance. That's going to be at the bottom. It's the space between the sewing and the edge of the fabric. So we're going to set where we're going to sew. Remember, 3 fingers for what we're going to turn down. And then think about what you're going to store in your bin or how big you want your bin. You can even use props. Maybe I want to store scissors in mine. So I put them on there and think about how big the bin would have to be for the scissors. But maybe I already have somewhere for the scissors, and instead I want to store my hair sticks. They're a bit smaller. So I'm going to, again, 3 fingers for folding down, and then I'm going to put the hair stick on there. And that makes a smaller bin, but I think I might want a smaller bin today. So I'm going to get my marker and mark out a dotted line about where I want the depth of my bin to be. It doesn't have to be super neat, but you do want it to be straight because this is the line you're going to be stitching on. And no one's going to see it, so you don't have to worry about the color that you use. Have your line drawn. If you look at it and go, oh, no, I want mine much shorter or much longer, you can draw a second line. It's okay. This is going to be on the inside of the bin, so people won't see it. Now that the line is drawn, you're going to take your threaded needle, and I'm going to start by pushing it through the side that has a seam on it. Now, even with the knots on the end, if I pull too hard, it's going to come right through the denim. So what I'm going to do is come up through the seam, and it takes a little bit of work to push through there. And then I'm going to open the 2 threads so that there's like a loop there. And I'm going to pass the needle through that loop and create a slip knot around the denim. And I'm just noticing that it's very hard to see because my fingers are in the way. But we're going to open that thread up. There you can tell. And the needle is going to go through the threads and make a slip knot. All right, and we're going to start our running stitch, which means we're going to go down through the denim and then come back up a little ways away. The stitches don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfectly straight on this. You're just learning, but we do want to keep them kind of even. Your goal for a perfect running stitch is to have every stitch the same length. That's the perfect one. I don't even do the perfect one, and I've been sewing a running stitch for years. So that's where you can see where I'm coming back up. That would be 2. And then we're going to go back down. That would be 3 if you're on the diagram. All right, some people like to pinch the fabric and kind of push it straight through. If that works for you, that's totally okay. For me, when I do that, my stitches end up being huge. So I pull up and then push down and pull up and do them individually. Here's me trying to push it through. And it works. It does, but it ends up being a really big stitch. So I prefer to go up and down. And we're going to continue doing that all the way across while I do that, I'm going to talk to you guys about some special books. Okay, so the first book I'd like to talk to you about is Super Simple Sewing for Kids by Rosa Curto. This is a great book for beginner sewers. It has very simple projects to start with, but the projects do get harder as they go along. So you can look at the table of contents here. There's a ton of things on here. Everything from beginning stitches and how to do them, through hand puppets to scented sachets, and even pouches that you can take with you. So I want to show you some of the stitching so you can see what the diagrams look like. I think these diagrams are great because in a video you see how my hands move, but sometimes it's a little hard to see what the stitches look like. And in this way you can see what they're supposed to look like in the fabric, as well as watching how my hands move while I'm making the stitches. So there are basting stitches and back stitches, diagonal stitches, and in this picture you will even see a blanket stitch or a buttonhole stitch, which we will be using later on. And then there's toy cars. You can learn how to sew buttons onto toys. This one's great too because it has all the templates for the shapes that you see. So if you're feeling a little unsure about your shapes, you can use the templates. Or how about a necklace? I know a lot of my friends out there love jewelry. You can make your own pom-poms and pom-pom necklaces with this book, and it'll take you step by step how to make them. If those are projects that are a little bit easier for you and you want something more advanced, have no fear. They have some patterns and templates to make refrigerator magnets, strawberries, cupcakes, and there are even some to make finger puppets, as I said, and pouches or purses to go. So again, that was Super Simple Sewing for Kids by Rosa Curto. The next book I have to talk to you guys about is I Can Make My Own Accessories by Louise Scott-Smith. This book is full of all different kind of accessories or things that you can use to add to your outfits. You can make some shoe charms. These are bunny rabbits, but you could easily turn them into tigers or bears with different colors. You can also do a lip brooch, which was incredibly easy to make out of this book, and I thought looked really cute. There are tons of different things that you can make. Things to make, like this awesome belt. This belt is made from upcycled tights. So if you have some tights that are maybe stretched out or have some runs in them, but you still love the colors and they match a bunch of your outfits, you can make this belt. You're going to slice up the tights and braid them to make this awesome belt that is your style. Belt's not your style? No worries. There's tons of other stuff to make in here. A jeweled collar, necklaces, garlands for your room, or maybe, how about an adorable teddy bear pouch that you can make to wear around your neck and carry whatever special stuff you need to your friend's house or maybe even to school. Oops, looks like I'm about to run out of thread. That's okay. It's always okay to use more than one piece of thread. You're going to knot off your thread by making a tiny stitch, and before you pull it tight, slip your needle through a loop, pull it tight, and then do that again. I usually do it twice, then snip the thread, then rethread my needle. Whoops, I'm still knotting it off there. And oh, nope, I'm restarting that. A tiny stitch and a slip knot, just like we did at the beginning. And I'm going to start doing a running stitch again, down and then up again, and complete the rest of the way across. Okay, our next book is a totally different type of DIY book. This isn't specific projects. Well, it does have some specific projects, but this is more a DIY fashion. It's how to start sewing and designing your own outfits. And I love this book because I know that there are a lot of kids out there that have a creative outlet and they like to design how they look, but making clothes is maybe not the easiest thing to jump into. This book has a section that talks about how to use the book, as well as a lot of patterns in it. Now, the patterns are some place to start, but it also talks about how to alter them and change them to be what you want them to be. So it's not necessarily about the specific projects in this book, but how to change them. Another great part of this book is it talks about how to measure your body and how to fit the clothes. And that's an important part because every body is different. And just because your body might not be the exact shape that a designer or a size in the store uses doesn't mean that you can't have awesome, unique clothing that's just you that fits fabulously. But the first part of knowing how to do that is knowing how to measure your body or the body that you're sewing for. Maybe you're not quite up to sewing whole pieces of clothing, but maybe you want to design a shirt or something like that. This book also has instructions on how to design an applique or add stuff to t-shirts or sweatshirts or leggings or shoes. Some of the projects are painting. Some of them, like this sweatshirt, are appliquing, which means taking one fabric and sewing it on top of another. A lot of great stuff and a lot of great information on designing your own look. All right, so it looks like I've gotten all the way across the leg of the denim. So I'm going to take a pause from the books and we're going to talk about what to do next. Now you could be totally finished and just knot off the thread here, but I want to make sure this bin is super strong. So I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to use the same thread and I'm going to go down through the denim. I want to be sure that my needle's not going through the same holes as it was before. So I'm going to kind of stitch in the middle of the other stitches. So if you see a black line of thread on the top, the needle's going to go down kind of through the middle of where that thread is. And when you come back up, the goal is to be in the middle of the blank spot of the next stitch. And it's okay if it's not perfect. Like I said, our goal is not perfection here. It's to make the bin stronger. There is a really big denim seam right there near the edge, which you can see me struggling with right now. And if you have a thimble, you can cover your finger so you don't hurt your finger pushing it through. Sometimes I will use something else, like if I have a cap or just anything hard to help me get through that. Or honestly, you could just skip over top of it. It's fine. And while we go across the other way, I'm going to talk about some more books. We Love to Sew Bedrooms is the next book I'd like to show you guys. This book is really awesome. There's a lot of different projects and a lot of different skills in this. Some of it is sewing, some of it's machine sewing, but they also have some painting projects, some design projects. Um, there is this awesome pillow. They actually have pillows 3 ways, but this one is my favorite. It shows you how to paint. In this case, it was denim, but you're painting with bleach. So instead of putting on color, you're actually removing color. And it's really neat. This particular project is a heart, but you don't have to do a heart. You could do a skull if you were into kind of creepy or goth look. You could do a car, you could do a star, you could do whatever shape you wanted to draw on the fabric. There's tons of different projects in this, from pillows to put on top of a pail to make a seat, to a headboard for your bed, to a really awesome sewn flower hand chandelier. I will say a lot of these projects, even though they say there are tons of different styles, they tend to be on the feminine side. But the skills you learn in here, if your style is not super feminine, that's okay. You can always use the skills that you learn in here to make it something different. You can change up the colors to make them more goth. You can change up the shapes to make them something totally different. Instead of using flowers and jewels, you could use music notes to make it a little bit more musical if you're very into rock. You could use soccer balls or basketballs or footballs if you're really into sports. Whatever you're into, And once you have the base skills, you can make whatever you like. So it looks like we're almost all the way back across the bottom of the bin. So we're going to finish up the last couple stitches, knot off the thread, and then you guys are going to use your thread snips to snip the thread, even though I'm going to, with my very bad habit, use my scissors. And then we have this huge amount of fabric, which is way bigger than we need for our seam allowance. As you can see, my seam allowance from my original bag is maybe an inch. You can do an inch and a half, but you do not need that much. So cut off the extra fabric if you have any. You might not. You might have decided to do a bigger bin and not have extra fabric. That's okay. And you don't want your seam allowance to be too small, because then if there's any stress on the seam, it's going to pull and the fabric will fray. So inch to half inch to an inch is what you need for there. All right, so it looks awesome. It's a pouch, but not really a bin because it won't stand up. Look at the other one that I've already finished. The bottom, you can't see in the video, but is a little bit more round. And we do that by sewing off some triangles on the bottom. So you're going to stand your bag up with one hand inside and kind of squish it down until there's a flat triangle on the side. Once you see that, there's kind of like a natural line, and you're going to get your marker and sketch a line across there, and then turn it around and draw the same line on the other side of the bottom. There you go. And we're going to thread a needle and sew those two down. Once they're down, it makes the bottom into like a little rounder or a square on the bottom, but flat so it will sit up. So we have our threaded needle. Make sure to remember to knot the end if you haven't. And this time we won't have a seam to start with, but we'll start kind of on the diagonal. You're going to put your needle through and come back over, loop it between the two pieces of thread and pull, and a slip knot just like we did before. And I'm going to go ahead and use the running stitch across that. And while I do, I'm going to tell you about the last two books we have for this week. Okay, these final two books are actually not sewing books. I thought maybe if you enjoyed sewing, you might also enjoy other crafty activities. And this one is Totally Cool Soap Making for Kids by Marie Browning. Now, some of the pictures might look a little bit dated, or you might not totally love the colors or the title, but there's a lot of really fun projects in this book. They've got buzzing bath soaps. They've got salt dough, kind of like Play-Doh, except it's soap. They have lip gloss and soaps that you can make to give as presents. Some of them are fossil soaps, where you can maybe get plastic bugs or dinosaurs and press them into the soap so it looks like you found dinosaur fossils or bug fossils. There are soaps that are like baked goods, so you could make a soap that looked like a lollipop or a muffin. There are molded soaps. There are fizzy bath bombs for fun. There are soaps that have a sponge embedded in them. There are all sorts of different things you can do. And again, like the other books, once you have the basic skills, you can make the projects look like anything you'd like. That I have for this week is Alice in Wonderland. Now, this is a very unique version of Alice in Wonderland. It has parts of the story, but it also has patterns throughout for little crocheted creatures from the story. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest this for a very beginning crocheter, but if you've crocheted before, you can read parts of a very great story and then crochet the caterpillar or maybe the white rabbit with his watch hanging from his vest, or maybe you want to crochet the very famous Alice with her golden hair and blue dress, who is the star of the whole story. Or you could crochet my two favorites, the Cheshire Cat and the Mad Hatter. No matter which you decide to crochet, or if you just read and enjoy the story, it's a very unique take on Alice in Wonderland. Just a few of the how-to or DIY books that we have at the library. There are tons of others, as well as stories about crafty kids like you guys. Stop into the library anytime to talk to me or Miss Florence about kids' books and any books that would interest you. Hope to see you there soon. So I've sewn off one of the corners and tied off and snipped my thread. Now I want to sew the other one, but I want to make sure they're even. So I did mark it, but I want to double check myself. So I'm going to flatten it out and put the points together. And then I'm going to flip it over to look at where I already stitched the one side and then double check that my line, and it's pretty much in order. So I'm going to go in fast mode because you guys have seen this before. We're going to thread our needle, loop it around, pull the needle out, push the loop through, and we've got a threaded needle. And then we're going to tie off the end. We need our knot to make our slip knot. And then I'm just going to sew off that last corner. In through the side, up, slip the needle through the two pieces of thread, and I'm going to go across, and I'm going to look like I'm a super fast sewer because I have this speed on about triple because you guys have seen me sew before so much through this video. And we are almost done. I'm so proud of you guys for sticking through this video. We're going to finish this off and you'll see how it stands up. And then we are going to embellish it. Okay, here we are. That's the final stitch. I'm going to snip my thread and put the needle safely away in my spool of thread. We're going to turn our bin, well, first we'll stand it up, make sure it stands, and then we'll turn it right side out. And you will see it does stand. It now has a rounder bottom. Mine's a little square. That's okay. And if you like it this way, you could leave it that way and not tuck it. But I like to have the ends tucked. So I'm going to tuck the edge. And look, I can put my pens in it. I can put my scissors in it. It's awesome. It's exactly what we wanted it to be. All right, so now the fun part begins, embellishing. Now, there's a lot of different options for embellishing. You can do beads, you could do felt flowers, you can do satin ribbons, you could do buttons. Me personally, this one, we're going to do some felt decorations. And I'm using a can as a template to make a circle. Then I'm folding the felt in two to cut 2 circles of the same size. Now, if you're registered for Stitching Stories with the library, you can stop by the library this week, the first week of February 2021, and pick up the bonus material for this month, which is 4 circles of felt and some buttons to decorate your bins with. But if you have any scraps of felt or fabric at home, you can use those. After I cut the circles out, I folded one into 4. And then, just like making a snowflake, I'm cutting around the edge to make a rounded edge, and so I'm going to have a 4-petaled flower when I'm done. Let me open that up so you guys can see. There you go, a 4-petaled flower. Now, this next one, I'm going to attempt to fold so that I get 5 petals out of it. And there we go. So that is my flower, and I'm going to pick a really big button to put in the middle of it. To sew it all together, I'm going to thread my needle, and I'm going to put it through the button first, and then sew the button to the flowers, and you're going to come back up the back of the flowers, through the button, and back down 3 or 4 times, just to make sure it all stays together. How you do this will actually depend on the button that you pick. The button I'm using right now has 2 holes in it. The button that I used for the first flower had 4. So if you only have 2, obviously you're coming up through 1 hole and down through the second. But if you have 4, you might be going up through 1, down through 2, up through 3. You just want to make sure you're going up and down through different ones. Once your flower is sewn together, just pick where you want it on your cuff, and then I'm not even going through both layers of denim. I'm only going through the top layer. So I do a little stitch on the denim and then come up through the flower. Be careful you don't poke your fingers with the needle. And then go back through the button, the felt, and the top layer of denim. After you've gone through all of them 2 or 3 times, you want to make a small stitch on the denim and tie off your thread and snip it. And then we're going to move on to our other decoration. You don't have to do more than one. I'm showing you 2. For my other one, I'm doing a star. I did the same circles of felt. I drew a star on it, and I'm just snipping off the extra felt to leave the star shape. And then so that my second one is similar to the first, I just traced over it, and I'm going to snip it out. So trace the lines on it. And if you're more comfortable with smaller scissors, you can use the smaller scissors or you can use the big ones, whichever you are most comfortable with doing. You don't even really have to use felt. You could use scraps of fabric. If you have fun fur, having a furry star on there might be very cute. So in the center of that star, you could put a bead or you could put another button, but I don't want a button. I think I'm just going to use the thread. So I'm going to make a really small stitch so it's not very easily seen. In the center of my star, I don't even know if you guys can see that tiny little stitch of black thread. And then I'm going to put it up on the cuff of the denim. I'm going to put it on the other side just so you could see what it would look like if you just did the star. And the same way, I'm going to go through just the top layer of denim, just the cuff, and through the felt, and then do that 2 or 3 times to secure the embellishment on there. And then a tiny stitch and cut my thread. The last embellishment I'm going to talk about is actually a satin ribbon, and I use the blanket stitch to attach it. A blanket stitch that you can see on this purple felt, you're going to go up over an edge and then loop your needle through the thread, kind of like we did when we started the running stitch, but you're going to do this horizontally across the edge. And this is really good for satin ribbons because satin ribbons like to fray. And then when you end it, you're just going to slip the needle through. So here, this is what I'm doing on the first bag that I made. I'm doing a buttonhole stitch or a blanket stitch. It's called both things. And I first stitched the ribbon underneath of the cuff. And then since I'm using this as a bag, I'm sewing the cuff down so that I can carry it around that way. And this is just a neater stitch than a running stitch. If you did a running stitch, you'd have little dotted lines along the edge of your handle, which you might not want. So a buttonhole stitch, you want them to be evenly placed, so you'll look like you have little vertical lines and a little scalloped edge on the bottom. And it'll be very secure, it won't fray, and the handle will hold. And then I ended up with a little bag that I could carry things in. Right, see, totally secure. And now for the sneak peek of next month. This is the little backpack buddy that we are going to make for our next project. I really hope you guys enjoyed doing this jeans bin with me, and I hope that you'll be back next month to do the backpack monster with me. And I will see you soon at the library. This is Miss Tish from the Tenafly Public Library. See you soon.